In January 1968, thousands of North Vietnamese soldiers moved through the mountains of northern South Vietnam. They carried artillery through dense jungle. They dug trenches into the red earth. They established supply routes across terrain that American commanders believed would be almost impossible for a large army to cross. At the center of their advance stood an isolated American combat base called Khe Sanh. Inside the perimeter were roughly 6,000 United States Marines and supporting troops. Outside were elements of several North Vietnamese divisions. To American reporters, military officers, and politicians, the situation looked terrifyingly familiar. 14 years earlier, Vietnamese forces had surrounded a French garrison at Dien Bien Phu. They had dragged heavy artillery through the mountains, cut the French supply lines, and slowly destroyed the isolated base. That defeat ended France's colonial war in Indochina. Now another Western army appeared to be trapped in another remote valley. President Lyndon Johnson reportedly demanded that his commanders guarantee Khe Sanh would not become an American Dien Bien Phu. But was that really what North Vietnam intended? Was Khe Sanh an attempt to destroy a major American garrison? Was it a diversion designed to pull American troops away from South Vietnam cities before the Tet Offensive? Or did the battle begin as one operation and evolve into something entirely different? The answer depends on what victory meant to each side. Khe Sanh was located in the northwestern corner of South Vietnam, only a few miles from Laos and south of the demilitarized zone. The surrounding plateau overlooked important infiltration routes connecting North Vietnam, Laos, and the battlefield farther south. The Americans had established a presence in the area years earlier. By 1967, the Khe Sanh combat base had become an important observation and patrol position. From there, American forces could watch movement near Route 9 and threaten portions of the logistical network commonly known as the Ho Chi Minh Trail. But Khe Sanh was also dangerously isolated. The base was surrounded by hills, jungle, and mountains. Route 9, the main road connecting it to the Vietnamese coast, was vulnerable to ambushes and often unusable. Most supplies, therefore, had to arrive by air. This meant the survival of the garrison depended on American control of the sky. General William Westmoreland, commander of United States forces in Vietnam, believed the northern provinces might become the location of a major conventional battle. He had reasons to think so. During the second half of 1967, North Vietnamese forces launched a series of major engagements near South Vietnam's borders. Battles erupted around Con Thien, Loc Ninh, Song Bi, and Dak To. These attacks drew American troops away from the population centers and toward remote frontier regions. Westmoreland believed the enemy might be attempting to create a decisive battlefield where superior American firepower could be confronted directly. Khe Sanh appeared to fit that pattern. In the months before the siege, North Vietnamese forces increased their presence around the plateau. Marine patrols encountered stronger resistance. Intelligence detected troop movements and artillery positions. Fighting intensified around the hills overlooking the base. The hills mattered because whoever controlled them could observe the airstrip and fire directly into the American position. In April and May 1967, Marines fought a series of brutal engagements, later known as the Hill Fights. The Americans eventually captured Hills 861, 881 North, and 881 South, but the cost was high. Hundreds of Marines were killed or wounded. The battles demonstrated that North Vietnamese regulars were willing to fight for the high ground surrounding Khe Sanh. By January 1968, the warning signs were becoming impossible to ignore. On January 20th, a North Vietnamese officer reportedly defected and told the Marines that a major attack was coming. Before dawn the following morning, North Vietnamese troops attacked Marine positions on Hill 861. Artillery, rockets, and mortars began falling across the combat base. One shell struck the main ammunition storage area. Explosions tore through the compound, destroying thousands of artillery rounds, grenades, and other supplies. Massive columns of smoke rose above Khe Sanh. For the men inside the base, the message was clear. The siege had begun. American commanders strengthened the perimeter and rushed reinforcements into the area. The defenders included Marines, Army personnel, South Vietnamese troops, and smaller Allied units operating around the plateau. They occupied not only the main combat base but also isolated positions on the surrounding hills. Those hilltop outposts were essential. They prevented North Vietnamese forces from placing artillery and observers directly above the airstrip, but they were also exposed. Every helicopter flight to the hills risked enemy fire. Every resupply mission depended on pilots approaching small landing zones surrounded by jungle. The North Vietnamese did not need to storm the base immediately. They could shell it, isolate it, pressure its outposts, and wait. The psychological comparison with Dien Bien Phu quickly spread through the American media. The similarities were real. Both bases were isolated. Both depended heavily on aerial resupply. Both were surrounded by high ground. In both cases, Vietnamese forces moved artillery through terrain Western commanders had considered extremely difficult. But there were also crucial differences. Dien Bien Phu had been established in a valley where French commanders believed their artillery and aircraft could dominate the battlefield. Instead, Viet Minh forces placed guns in protected positions in the surrounding hills and slowly destroyed the French defenses. At Khe Sanh, the Americans possessed far greater air power. They could call upon Marine aircraft, Navy carrier aviation, Air Force tactical fighters, helicopter gunships, and B-52 strategic bombers. The United States also had improved radar, electronic sensors, communications, and aerial delivery systems. The North Vietnamese could surround the base, but completely cutting it off would be much more difficult. Westmoreland prepared an enormous air campaign called Operation Niagara. The name reflected his intention to create a continuous waterfall of bombs around Khe Sanh. Reconnaissance aircraft searched for troop concentrations, roads, storage areas, and artillery positions. Electronic sensors were scattered across the surrounding terrain. Some detected vibrations or sounds associated with men and vehicles. Intelligence teams combined this information with aerial photography, radio intercepts, patrol reports, and prisoner interrogations. When analysts believed they had located enemy forces, aircraft and artillery were directed toward these suspected positions. B-52 bombers became one of the most feared weapons in the battle, flying at high altitude, often unseen and unheard until the explosions began. Formations of B-52s dropped enormous bomb loads across carefully selected target areas. The strikes shattered trees, collapsed bunkers, and transformed sections of the surrounding landscape. American accounts frequently describe North Vietnamese units being caught while assembling for attacks. However, measuring the actual effect was extremely difficult. The jungle concealed bodies, equipment, and damage. American estimates of North Vietnamese casualties often relied on indirect evidence and could not always be independently confirmed. Air power helped keep the garrison alive, but it did not end the pressure. Artillery and mortar rounds continued to fall. The airstrip was repeatedly damaged. Aircraft approaching the base faced anti-aircraft fire in dangerous weather. Low clouds, fog, and monsoon conditions could make landing nearly impossible. Traditional unloading methods were too slow and exposed aircraft on the runway. American transport crews therefore used several innovative techniques. Some aircraft descended rapidly, released cargo, and accelerated away without fully stopping. Others dropped supplies by parachute. A low-altitude extraction system allowed cargo pallets to be pulled from an aircraft as it moved along the runway. Every delivery carried risk. Transport aircraft were hit. Helicopters were damaged or destroyed. Pilots sometimes had only seconds to place their aircraft on the ground before enemy gunners adjusted their aim. Life inside the base became a cycle of incoming fire, repairs, patrols, interrupted sleep, and waiting. Marines reinforced their bunkers with sandbags, timber, steel, and sections of runway matting. They learned to recognize the sounds of different weapons. A distant launch might provide a few seconds of warning. At other times, the first indication of an attack was the explosion itself. The defenders could not see most of the enemy surrounding them. North Vietnamese soldiers remained hidden in trenches, bunkers, caves, and jungle positions beyond the perimeter. This created a strange battlefield. American forces possessed overwhelming firepower, but often lacked visible targets. North Vietnamese forces possessed concealment and the initiative but had to operate under some of the heaviest aerial bombardment of the war. Then, on January 30th and 31st, the conflict suddenly expanded far beyond Khe Sanh. North Vietnamese and Viet Cong forces attacked cities, towns, military installations, and government centers across South Vietnam. The Tet Offensive had begun. Fighting erupted in Saigon. Communist commandos entered the grounds of the United States Embassy. Hue became the scene of a prolonged and devastating urban battle. For American commanders, the timing created an enormous question. Had the buildup around Khe Sanh been designed to distract attention from the cities? During the weeks before Tet, American reinforcements had moved toward the northern provinces. Intelligence officers had focused intensely on the possibility of another Dien Bien Phu. Khe Sanh consumed the attention of the White House, the Pentagon, the press, and senior commanders. From that perspective, the operation had already achieved something important for North Vietnam. It had encouraged the United States to focus on a remote base while preparations for attacks across South Vietnam continued. But this does not necessarily mean the siege was only a deception. North Vietnam committed substantial forces around Khe Sanh. Those forces constructed roads, artillery positions, trenches, and logistical networks. They accepted devastating bombardment and significant casualties. Some historians believe North Vietnamese leaders were prepared to destroy the garrison if the opportunity appeared. A diversion and a genuine attack were not mutually exclusive. Khe Sanh could draw American forces north while still offering the possibility of a major military and psychological victory. The attack on the nearby Special Forces camp at Lang Vei demonstrated the seriousness of the threat. During the night of February 6th and the early hours of February 7th, North Vietnamese troops attacked the camp with infantry and PT-76 light tanks. The appearance of tanks shocked many of the defenders. North Vietnamese engineers and logistical units had managed to bring armored vehicles through the difficult terrain of Laos and western Quang Tri province. Anti-tank weapons destroyed some of them, but the attackers penetrated the camp. Lang Vei was overrun. Survivors attempted to escape toward Khe Sanh. The fall of the camp tightened the pressure on the main base and showed that North Vietnamese forces could coordinate artillery, armor, infantry, and engineers. However, the expected all-out assault against the Khe Sanh combat base never developed in the same way as the final attack at Dien Bien Phu. There were attacks on outposts and sections of the perimeter. There were probes, trench systems, artillery barrages, and attempts to disrupt aerial resupply. But North Vietnamese forces did not launch a single overwhelming human assault that broke through the Central American defenses. There are several possible explanations. American bombing may have disrupted troop concentrations before they could attack. North Vietnamese commanders may have decided the cost would be too great. The broader Tet Offensive may have changed their priorities, or capturing the base may never have been the only objective. While Khe Sanh remained under pressure, American and South Vietnamese forces prepared a relief operation. Operation Pegasus began on April 1, 1968. The United States Army's 1st Cavalry Division, operating with Marines and South Vietnamese troops, advanced westward along Route 9. Engineers repaired the road while helicopters placed infantry and artillery into landing zones ahead of the main column. This combination of ground movement and air mobility allowed Allied forces to bypass obstacles and attack North Vietnamese positions across a wide area. As the relief force approached, resistance continued, but the large formations that had surrounded Khe Sanh began withdrawing or dispersing. On April 5th, elements of the relief force reached positions associated with the defenders. Within days, Route 9 was reopened and the siege was considered broken. The Marines had held the base. The United States declared victory. From a narrow tactical perspective, that claim had strong support. The garrison had not been overrun. The defenders had maintained control of the combat base. American air power and artillery had prevented North Vietnamese forces from concentrating freely. The relief operation reopened the ground route and forced the enemy away from the immediate area. Khe Sanh had not become another Dien Bien Phu. But the story did not end there. Only a few months later, American forces began dismantling and abandoning the combat base. In June 1968, the United States announced that changing battlefield conditions made the fixed position unnecessary. By July, the evacuation and destruction of facilities were largely complete. North Vietnamese forces later moved into the area. To many Americans, the decision was confusing. If Khe Sanh had been important enough to defend at enormous cost in January, why was it no longer important by summer? Military commanders argued that circumstances had changed. Mobile operations and helicopter-borne forces could patrol the region without maintaining a vulnerable permanent base. The enemy had developed alternative infiltration routes. Holding Khe Sanh was no longer worth the manpower and logistical burden. Those explanations had military logic. But politically and psychologically, the abandonment allowed North Vietnam to claim victory. Hanoi could argue that its forces had compelled the Americans to leave. The United States could claim it had defeated the siege and abandoned the base voluntarily. Both statements contained part of the truth. This is why declaring a clear winner at Khe Sanh remains difficult. The United States won the immediate battle for the base. Its troops survived. Its air power prevented the destruction of the garrison. Its relief forces reopened Route 9. North Vietnam did not achieve a dramatic battlefield victory comparable to Dien Bien Phu. But North Vietnam was fighting a political war as well as a military one. Khe Sanh captured American attention. It encouraged comparisons with France's catastrophic defeat. It helped pull troops, aircraft, intelligence resources, and political focus toward a remote corner of South Vietnam before and during Tet. Even without capturing the base, North Vietnamese forces demonstrated that they could determine where the United States concentrated its power. The greater paradox is that Khe Sanh may have been a tactical American success inside a strategic American crisis. At Dien Bien Phu, the Viet Minh destroyed a French garrison and produced an unmistakable military defeat. At Khe Sanh, the North Vietnamese did not destroy the American garrison, but the battle occurred at the same moment. The Tet Offensive shattered American claims that victory was approaching. Television viewers saw the embassy attack in Saigon, the destruction in Hue, and Marines sheltering from artillery at Khe Sanh. The United States could win individual engagements, while public confidence in the entire war continued to collapse. That was the deeper danger President Johnson faced. The question was not simply whether the Marines could hold the perimeter. The question was whether holding it would bring the United States any closer to achieving its political objectives. Khe Sanh exposed the difference between battlefield success and strategic victory. American aircraft could deliver thousands of tons of bombs. Transport crews could keep an isolated garrison supplied. Marines could survive weeks of artillery fire. Army cavalry units could reopen the road. But none of those achievements resolved the central political problem of the war. North Vietnam was willing to accept enormous losses and continue fighting. The United States was operating thousands of miles from home with declining public support and no clear path to a decisive conclusion. So was Khe Sanh America's Dien Bien Phu? Militarily, no. The base was not overrun. The garrison was not forced to surrender. The defenders were relieved, and American firepower inflicted severe damage on the forces surrounding them. But symbolically, the comparison cannot be dismissed so easily. Like Dien Bien Phu, Khe Sanh became a test of political will. It demonstrated how an isolated battlefield could dominate national attention, and it revealed that victory could mean very different things to the armies fighting the same war. The Americans fought to prove that the base could not be taken. The North Vietnamese fought to influence the larger war. In the end, the Marines held Khe Sanh. Then the United States left it. The battlefield remained in Vietnam. The argument over who truly won has never completely ended.